Hello everyone, I hope you all are doing well. So welcome back to the part 2 of media chapter. And in this part 2 we'll be covering the difference between ownership and control, right? And in the second half of the video we'll be exploring the topic of freedom and censorship in media. So coming on to the difference between ownership and control. First, we need to understand that there is a difference between ownership and control. So ownership and control are not the same thing. It is interesting to know that the world's media is owned by a small number of giants like Disney or Time Warner, right? We should know that media can be either state owned or it can be privately owned. Like I said, ownership is different from control. So when I say that when a person is in control of media, they are the ones who make day-to-day decisions. They're like the editors of newspapers, film studio, and television, right? But in comparison to the controllers, or unlike the controllers, owners are the ones who are directly controlling the media organization, giving orders to the staff. They are the ones appointing senior staff and the editors, right? So they're not the ones, owners are not the ones who are making the day-to-day decisions. They're the ones who basically are at a more senior position, and they're basically appointing people who will work under them, right? But you also need to understand that sometimes controllers, people who are taking day-to-day decisions, they can also be the owners of a media company, right? Okay, moving on to the second half of our video and moving on to the topic of freedom and censorship in media. So we know that freedom is when you're able to express any sort of viewpoint that you have, right? You can come on, you have journalists who basically exercise their right to freedom of speech, and they say whatever they want to. Censorship is when you basically filter out certain things that you want to show or you don't want to show, right? There's some sort of filter through which certain things are passed on. And we know that media is an important agency of social control. And what do I mean by that? It means that media can ensure that people act in a particular way. For example, the images that you see on media or the opinions that you hear on media, it can basically shape and influence your beliefs, your acts, or what you think, right? Because if you consume it every day, then obviously it's going to have a direct or indirect effect on how you behave, right? So in states where media is directly controlled by the government, it can be used to initiate a propaganda. Now, what is a propaganda? Propaganda can be initiated by when you inject people with a biased or specific viewpoint. And when the media is controlled by the state, it basically, how can it initiate a propaganda in the favor of the state? It's by showing government policies favorably, the opposition parties' policies unfavorably or in a bad light, and not showing issues or problems that can harm the reputation of the government. And I would like to illustrate this. I would like to make it more clear for you by quoting some historical examples. So some historical examples of very successful propaganda campaigns include the Nazi propaganda that was initiated by Hitler in Germany. So when he carried out his mass genocide against the Jews, how was he able to show that Jews are an inferior race than the Germans? So basically, with the help of media, he was able to construct an image that the Jews are subhumans, or they're not, or they're inferior, or they even do not deserve to live, right? So it's right that we kill them. And so he carried out a propaganda in which he basically made the Germans despise the Jews. So then the Jews were taken to these concentration centers, and they were killed, or they were forced to work. So this was all initiated, this was all made successful through media, and what the media was injecting in the minds of people. Then another very successful example of a propaganda campaign that was initiated with the help of media, and the media was able to exercise social control. It was in the time of Stalin and the wave of communism that started, right? So in Russia, how did communism gain popularity? The ideas of equality, or the ideas of freedom, or the idea that everything needs to be state owned. Stalin basically presented through media, through films, through television. He basically presented communism in a very good light, right? This is something that is going to buy you freedom or equality, and everybody is going to live happily. Media was used to construct such images. and to some extent he was successful, right, in furthering on his message.